What can we say about the year 2021? I think if we're going to be honest, we might simply say this year has been hard. But just because something's hard doesn't mean it's not also good. I want to suggest to you, in the life of First Pres Maumee, that though 2021 has been hard, it has also been very good. Learning to worship in this year has been hard, but it's led to some new and good opportunities for us to praise God and engage our community. We were able to offer our first Blue Christmas service on the longest night. We were able to worship on Christmas Eve in a somewhat traditional way, but anticipating that many would not be able to come and join us, we gave significant effort in the days leading up to the holiday, inviting our membership to come and offer their gifts of song and reading, recording a Christmas Eve service that would engage our congregation and our community online together. I remember that night where we recorded the service. It was such a blessing because on that night we saw some who we had not seen in over a year. During Lent and Holy Week, we were able to worship in mostly traditional ways, but we were also led to offer our first sunrise service in many, many years. We had it down at Sidecut Park, and while we thought maybe we would have a dozen or two join us, we were joined by well over 50 people from our community. We continue to see more and more coming to join us in the sanctuary as we worship together, and we also continue to see people not only locally, but from across the country join us in worship online. It was hard to think about how we might serve in 2021. Not that there was a lack of need, of course, but many of our routines and projects that we were used to giving ourselves to weren't available to us. We couldn't go into the schools, and the hospitals were limited to only those necessary personnel. So what would we do? Well, we didn't just sit on our hands. We continued to serve a meal, for example, every month to those who were in need in the old south end of Toledo through our partner Mosaic Ministries. And right along with them on special occasions, holidays like Thanksgiving and Easter, we purchased and assembled bags of groceries, giving them to families that they might be able to enjoy the holiday together just as you and I are used to. It was hard to think about how we could continue to fulfill the vow to make disciples of the young people who had been entrusted to our congregation. Confirmation, for example, took place, but it took place this year almost exclusively over Zoom. Some of our young people, thankfully, were able to begin gathering together for Bible study, though we stayed spread apart for much of the year. And you'll see masks in many of these pictures. And thankfully, even though there were new protocols and policies, many of our young people were able to attend camp thanks to the generosity of this congregation. And this camp is not just all fun and games. For many of these young people, this is where they hear about the love of Jesus in a profound way and begin a personal relationship with Him. Do you know that in this hard year, God proved Himself good again in some incredible ways? One of the ways that I am most excited about was the introduction of 4 young people, seniors in high school, disconnected from the life of this church, young people whose families do not worship here, all of a sudden showed up in our midst and became part of this church family, offering their faith and their talents in service to God together. That doesn't happen. Seniors in high school don't choose to go to church on their own, and yet in this hard year, God did that. I spent a little bit of time over Zoom talking to some of these young people about their faith, and I want you to hear from them. So I'm really excited to be with Taylor Snyder and Rosa Barber and Elijah Lundquist. Maybe Taylor, can you start? Just tell us, how did you end up here at First Pres Maumee?
So I came to First Pres Maumee first through Isaac. That's like obviously the short answer, but
I know Isaac, I think. Who is Isaac?
yeah. So the first service that I actually came to was the first week of Advent in 2019.
Okay.
And we had started becoming each other's best friends, and he knew that I liked going to church, but after coming back from Dubai, I didn't have a home church. And that like next week, he just texted me on Saturday and was like, hey, you should come to church with me tomorrow. I can pick you up, even though I'm not supposed to be driving. And I loved it. So obviously I went because of Isaac, but I kept going because I loved the community and loved hearing you preach.
Yeah. Well, and then because when COVID hit, then you took a really significant role helping our church.
Yeah.
So what were you doing?
So the first week of COVID, Clint volunteered me to sing in the worship band with Isaac and Shannon and Kristen, and just like record the services on Saturday, which is definitely when I started to be like more involved with the church.
Right. Elijah and Rosa, you came. How did you find your? I'm still not sure I can answer this honestly. Like, how did you find our church, and what motivated you to come here? And tell us that story.
So the way we ended up coming to First Presbyterian is, first I'll have to correct you.
Okay.
Three young people came to your church.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
And one of them, his name was Nathaniel.
Right.
He originally found the church out of about 3 churches we were going to try going to, because at the time Rosa was trying to separate from her family's church.
Okay.
And her and I had been going to, we went to a few before we came to First Presbyterian, and when we finally decided, we came with our friend Nathaniel, and we loved the sermon. It's what that was pretty much the end all be all of
Jason must have been preaching that week then. Is that right?
It was you.
Okay.
It was a sermon about cleaning up clutter in our lives.
Okay.
I don't remember exactly which verses that was.
Yeah, I don't either.
Yeah. But just immediately when we walked in, it was like everyone was super friendly and really engaging. And
so what is one of your favorite memories of your time here at First Pres?
I would actually have to say one of my favorite memories was the first sermon that we came.
Okay.
Because we were talking about obviously cleaning up clutter, you made the avid joke of saying that your son Isaac's room is very messy.
I do. I remember that sermon now. Yeah.
And that really set me on like I like this guy's personality sort of path.
And Rosa, do you have a favorite memory?
Well, for me, it was definitely getting baptized.
Okay.
It was something, my favorite memory was getting baptized, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I think it was something I was considering doing and had thought that something that I needed to do for a while there, but it didn't, but I wanted to wait till I had a church that I felt connected with.
Right.
To get baptized, since it didn't make sense for me to get baptized at the church I grew up in and then immediately leave 2 weeks later and not intend to come back for the rest of my high school years, or to just pick some random church that I didn't care about. But then it worked out really well that we found a church that we connected with fairly early on in our church search.
Cool. Taylor, how about you? What's a favorite memory of yours?
But my favorite memory through the church is definitely the first Christmas Eve service that I went to.
Okay.
just because I think like it was the first Christmas Eve I had gone to church, but also the first Christmas Eve that I wasn't with my family the whole day.
Mm.
And even though like I had no family, I think like my heart was just so full during that service. Like I was so like in the presence of the Lord, but also just like everyone around was just like treating me like I was family. So it just like felt like my family was there anyway.
So, Taylor, so how are you trying to pursue your faith there at Ohio State?
So I'm really involved in Young Life, which obviously most of the congregation probably knows that I was involved in high school because of Lily, but in Ohio State, Young Life is absolutely huge.
Okay.
And I've met so many people that are just like the most intentional friendships that I've ever had in my life. And
Right.
they hold me accountable. And I'm in a small group Bible study, which is like just girls, and we just have a Bible study and talk about how like the Lord is working in our life that week. I'm also in first year leadership training, so I'm training to be a Young Life leader right now.
Okay.
And hopefully by the time I come home in winter, there will be like an idea of if that's gonna get to happen. And then I'm also in a student ministry on campus, which is new. It's called Salt Company.
Okay.
And it's called a campus group, and it's just another bunch of girls, and we meet up and just kind of like talk about how we're feeling about like our faith that week and relate it back to like the sermon that they did on Sunday in the church that's like related to them.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And that's a ministry I know that's connected to a local church, and I'm really glad that you're part of that for sure, as well as Young
Yeah.
Life and everything else you're doing. So
Yeah.
it's exciting. How about you, Elijah and Rosa? I know you're at Bluffton, and you were here back home. Was that just this past Sunday or the Sunday before? And you were telling me about, trying to find a church, all that type of thing. What's that been like for you?
Honestly, I didn't expect it at Bluffton, but it's a very progressive community, not just on campus, but in a lot of the local churches.
Okay.
So it's actually been quite hard to try and find a church that's more like a more fundamentalist church, more traditional and to the word, rather than what is God, rather than what are the ideas that people have about him. And it's been somewhat frustrating.
Okay.
But we did find one church that I quite like. There's a Southern Baptist church, a very, very small one.
Okay.
There's maybe 30 people tops who go there that we've seen. And I think that it's going to be nice to connect with such a small group of people.
Yep.
And not have to worry so much that there's things being sprinkled in that I don't want influencing me.
Sure.
But campus has been there's been a lot more of it than I was expecting.
Okay.
Especially because I went in knowing that this was a Christian school.
Yeah.
But I guess it's been a little disappointing so far in that aspect.
Right. Sometimes you still do have to sift that out a bit. I'm glad you found that church though. Stacy and I worshiped at a very small church like that, and it was great. I mean, they adopted us, and it was like having grandparents and aunts and uncles and all of that while we were in church. And so lean into that. Anything, Elijah, anything you'd want to add to your experience?
No, I go with Rosa, and so there's not much more that I can add than that.
Yeah, I know it's hard. It's really important to find a church that will focus on Jesus and preach from the scripture. And while some maybe listening to this think that's an obvious thing that most every church does that, it's not always true. And so that might lead into, so how can the people at First Pres Mommy be praying for you in the next few months as you continue to try to settle in this kind of new experience in college and continue to pursue Christ there? What do you think, Elijah and Rosa? We'll start back with you.
I think that really we just need prayers for our grade, obviously our grades, how we're doing in school, but I think being able to form a good relationship with the community around us so that every opportunity is presented to us,
Right.
that we could glorify God and that we can learn about God.
Absolutely.
I think without those, there isn't going to be much here for us.
Right. Well, I'm grateful. Of course, our worship services are online now, and we use social media to try to, nurture community. And so I hope you'll take part of that. At the same time, I would affirm your desire to find a local body there to worship with. I think that's important. Rosa, anything you'd want prayer for?
Well, obviously, I would want prayer for everything that Elijah said: grades, school, doing well. That's important. But I would say that I think I've definitely been struggling with forming connections.
Okay.
In general, just because I know that I have very strong opinions and very strong thoughts.
Okay.
And the idea of I know what I believe about God, and I feel very strongly that it's backed up by the word and the Bible. And I obviously want to correct every mistake that I have about him, but I know that I struggle to find the balance between letting that separate me from people who are obviously a bad influence and people who just need help with the Lord. And I find that I get very frustrated easily.
Yeah.
And somewhat prideful. And I know that that's something many Christians can struggle with, in the idea of, well, I know best, therefore I shouldn't communicate with this person.
Yeah.
Because they're saying things that I would believe to be lies about God.
Right.
And I really want to find that balance between what I know to be true about the word and what he says, and being able to form connections with people who, despite what I would consider
Right. Sure.
the big differences in our fundamental beliefs about him.
Right. I really appreciate the way you put that, because I think it's really good self-awareness first on your part of going, all right, so I believe strongly and that's a good thing, but you want to be open to building relationships. You want to be open to testing new ideas against the word. You don't want to shut yourself off from people, especially, college is a time to be able to entertain those thoughts a little bit, but again, up against the word and say, all right, so is this truth or not? So we'll pray for that. Hey, Taylor, how about you? What can we be praying for?
So I can't speak for all of us, but I definitely think that following Christ in college is so hard. There's so much going on that influences how involved I am, but also just how willing I am to share that with people, because college kids are judgy, and it's definitely been hard, but I think it also has just made my experience so much better, and my faith has already grown so much since I got here.
Good.
But I think just praying that now that I know that I'm secure in my faith here, that I can start to disciple people and bring people into it, because I think that's something I've really struggled with, just inviting people and trying to share the gospel with them without being afraid of the rejection aspect of it.
Right.
Also, it's been hard to find a church here that I really love, just because I love First Pres so much that churches here just don't add up. And I think a way that the church can support me not in prayer is just holding me accountable when I come home for going to church, asking me have you been going to church, or have you at least been watching church?
Right.
Because I know I need to, but like I said, it's just hard to find somewhere that is even close to being home.
Yeah. Thank you, Elijah, Rosa, and Taylor. Well, thanks for spending this time with me, and we will see you at Christmas, if not before. I hope you can see that though this year has been hard, God has been good. And I think it's just the beginning. As we're nearing the end of 2021, we're beginning to think about 2022. And what we are sensing is that God is equipping us for something even greater. We believe that as our world and as our community comes out of this pandemic, that our neighbors may be even more prepared to receive the message of the gospel and to be encountered by the love of God's people than they were before. And so we're giving ourselves to prayer and to Bible study and to thinking about how we might represent our faith to our community in dedicated ways. We're gathering together as the church family over a meal that we hope that will be offered to our community in the months to come. We believe God wants to do some big things. And so with that in mind, as the year draws to a close, allow me to invite you both to thank God for who He is and what He's done in our midst, and also to ask God if He might have you help us prepare for whatever it is God is calling us to in this next year. Now, we know that in our world today, that the end of the calendar year presents an opportune time for many to reflect on your giving, to reflect on your goals for the year, to consider whether God might have you make a year-end gift to the church and to His work. And so I want to make that invitation to you. The church finances are fine. Our income is meeting expenses. But if we want to take that next step in service to God, we need to do that together. And we need to do that sacrificially. And so my request to you, friends and church family, First Pres Mommy, is take your finances before the Lord at the end of this year and consider making a year-end gift to the mission of this church. And we will together celebrate the goodness of God even more after we see what He does in 2022.